some of them are the pioneers. Some of them were right underneath. Some of them were right underneath that pioneer level. It's like that upcoming group of people who were influenced by those pioneers, but who were kind of right there and saw it unfold. And as we get away from the pioneers, we kind of forget about who the DJ is, what the DJ does. And so I really just wanted to spend some time, more than anything else, documenting those names, those peoples, a chronology. Because if we don't document our own culture, somebody else will. And typically when somebody else is doing it, they gonna rewrite the history. So I wanted to make sure that I put that in a certain perspective, and also put it in an academic space, because that's where to get authentic tellings of hip hop in academic spaces has always been it's always been tricky. Let me say it like that. That's a nice way to say it.
Yeah. Hey, before we continue, can you tell where can everyone get your book?
Well, everyone can get the book. You can get it from, whatever your local bookstore is. If they don't have it in there, they should be able to order it. You can get the book on Amazon.com. You can get the book at my website, drtoddcraig.com. If you get it from my website, I make sure that I sign those books before they go out. So if you want an autographed copy of the book, drtoddcraig.com, drtoddcraig.com. Real simple and plain.
Okay, yeah. Everyone needs to get this book. I definitely love it, man. It's very insightful, like I said.
Oh, listen, you already know. You already know what it is. Yeah, it's a tough job, but somebody's got to do it. So happy to be here for the people.
No, I feel you. But so what area in New York did you grow up in?
So we started out in Queensbridge houses in Long Island City, right in the galaxy of Queens, or the borough of Queens. Everybody who's from the 5 boroughs knows that Queens is the best borough. I'll just put that out there like that.
Hey, I agree with you 100%.
So my family started off in Queensbridge, and then my mother moved us 4 blocks down to Ravenswood houses. And so my family structure is typical black family structures where different people serve in different parental roles. So okay. My mother, the one who raised me, was actually my great aunt, my grandmother's sister. She had 3 sons, and those 3 sons essentially serve as like, the oldest one is a father figure to me. The middle one is kind of like big brother / uncle. And then the youngest one is kind of more like a younger, older brother. So they had all grown up in Queensbridge. My mother then, I got to her when I was like 3 months. A few years later, she moved us down to Ravenswood. And the first thing that she would say when I was, old enough to kind of go outside by myself and move around was, yo, don't go to Queensbridge. And so, any kid who is a kid is going to hear that and be like, okay, I won't. And then I'd run out the door and then go to Queensbridge. My cousins lived in Queensbridge too. And so I would say when I describe my upbringing, it really is in Ravenswood houses, but it's also in Queensbridge houses.
Queensbridge, okay. When did you gravitate towards hip hop? Because I know, I can tell you exactly what age. I can tell you what artists that drew me to hip hop. When did you realize that hip hop was going to be a major part of your life?
So I think those are 2 different questions. I don't know if I knew that hip hop was gonna be a major part of my life in this way when I was younger.
When did you fall in love with hip hop?
I fell in love with hip hop during my childhood. Super early, listening to Mr. Magic and Marley Marl on the radio.
Okay.
It was on WBLS 107.5 FM. uh Mr. Magic and Marley Marl would be on Fridays and Saturday nights, and then on 98.7 Kiss FM, Chuck Chill Out would be on Fridays. Red Alert would be on Saturdays. Once I kind of fell into that, it was like, oh, like Marley Marl was from the hood. He's from Queensbridge, so
Yeah.
to see my cousins, like, you could see Marley or see MC Shan walking around the block, or Roxanne Shante was right there on my cousin's block.
Really? Just walking around?
People. And so, like, you would see these people and be like, yo, I was just in the crib, like, listening to your song, and there you go. And then the park jams were in River Park right there. So it was what I say a lot of times is kind of, as hip hop was growing up, I was growing up as well. And so I fell in love with hip hop early in my youth. And then kind of being, when you're that close to like an epicenter, there's no way around the influence, right? So the example I typically give to people is, for junior high school, I went to the school called Oliver Wendell Holmes Academy, which is also known as Junior High School 204, right? I was in 8th grade, Nas was in 9th grade. So I saw Nas performing at talent shows in 204. Shout out to everybody who went to 204. People who went to 204 know exactly what I'm talking about. So it kind of like, hip hop was just there. Like it. And so as I was growing up, hip hop was growing up. And I was just there for the listening, for the watching, for the consuming, you know. Shout out to Fab Five Freddy and Yo MTV Raps. Shout out to Ralph McDaniels and Video Music Box.
Man. I forgot about those pioneers. I grew up on those guys. I used to run home from school to watch their Video Music Box. Man. And then we all would talk about it the next day at school. Hey, did you see the new artist that just dropped? Did you hear the new song? Man, yeah. Red Alert. How could I forget about Red Alert?
To Red Alert.
Yes, man, you're bringing back memories for real, because those guys, they really started everything. But I when you say that you could go to the hood and walk around and see these artists, do you think it is because music was just, hip hop was just getting its start, and these guys did not have the money to buy the big mansions and buy the big houses and move out like they're doing now?
So I think artists back then would have told you that their thing, like, they weren't chasing a bag, they weren't chasing clout. Their thing was, if I get my record on the radio, I made it. The culture, it was always about the love of the art and the music. And so to a lot of those artists, like, the radio was the place. Like, when you heard your song on the radio, you were like, yo, I did it. It was also, it was a different time period too, because it wasn't, back then you didn't have the technology that would allow you to just instantly record, instantly make a song. You know, if I wanted to, I could put out a song in the next 20 minutes, right? I could record it on my Mac, it could go viral. Now, what I always say is, just because I can do it, that doesn't mean I should do it. It just means that. But back then, we didn't have that same sort of technology, so you had to go to a recording studio. You had to pay an hourly rate in recording studios. And you're talking about people who are living in New York City public housing, so they not rich. So you had people pooling their money together. You had people who were like, yo, we gotta write these verses before we get in there, because when we get in there, we got enough money for 2 hours, and we gotta bang out these 3 songs in 2 hours. So I think that was the difference back then, was just the accessibility to be able to make music was different. But I don't think people thought about stardom and fame at that point. I think it was just kind of about, yo, I love the music, I love the rhyme, this is what I want to do.
I can definitely see that, because I'm glad you said that word, clout, because that plays a major part in hip hop now, and I don't like it. I really don't, because clout chasing, there's no love in it at all. Back then, I could see what you mean when you said that you literally had to get your money up, and you may get a 3-hour block at the studio, but you knew that those 3 hours I was in there working. There was no breaks, no playing, because it was money. Time was money back then. But like you said, now any artist can just put out anything at the drop of a dime and then go viral for one song only. Some artists actually just started writing songs yesterday, and they blow up today.
And look, I think it's the gift and the curse, right? So for a seasoned artist who is, invested in their craft, I think having the technology to be able to just put music out on your own is incredible, right? But not everybody's a musician, right? Like, and I think that's where everything, like, not everybody is a lyricist. Not everyone is a DJ, is a producer. Not everyone is a teacher. Not everyone is a carpenter. Not everyone is a general contractor, right? So I'm not calling one of my friends who I work with at the college to come fix the running toilet that I got. Like, that's not how it works. Somebody who isn't necessarily a musician or a rapper to come in and do that hip hop work is, it's just, I think we've kind of lost the sense of kind of people honing and perfecting their craft 10,000 hours in, right? I think we've shifted away from that. But I'm thankful for the technology, because I think the technology gives the people who should have those tools the tools for them to do the work at a better rate. And you always want to hear it in the music, like the people who are out there, they just want a reputation, they just want the bag, they just want their friends to know that they went viral. You can hear that in the music. And the people who love the art and the science of, not just necessarily rapping, but lyricism and putting words and lines and bars and images together, you're going to hear that in the music too.
And yeah, it's crazy you say that, because in your book, and I did an interview with a barber a couple of weeks ago, where he said that he believes in making music, making timeless music, not music for the times. And in your book, I forget who said it, but there's a MC or a DJ who said that exact same thing. He does not want to make music like most of the kids now. They're making music for right now.
Right. I'm almost positive that was Scheme Rich's where he said something to the input forever.
Yeah. Did you? So you actually interviewed some of these people in your book? Because I saw where you had phrases.
Oh yeah. So my book is an extension of my doctoral dissertation. And in my dissertation, I talk about DJs. In academia, we call it a qualitative research study, where I'm interviewing people and using the interviews as kind of the source research data to make the points and claims. So I interviewed over 90 DJs. In the book, about 30 of those interviews from that pool of 90 kind of made its way into the book. And the point of that was just, in academia, a lot of people, like, they wax poetic about hip hop. They talk about hip hop from afar. Don't know a rapper, never went to a show, don't know what a turntable is, and I say that just kind of like in the same way that we was just talking about, like, I wouldn't call a barber to fix the roof on my house, right? Academics who are talking about hip hop who have never touched or experienced hip hop, and quiet as it's kept, they might actually even be scared of what the culture is and what the culture means. So for me, my argument is always, if we're going to talk about hip hop culture, we need to include the people who are the cultural practitioners, the people who practice the culture, who make the music, who make the art go, right? And so adding those 30 interviews into the book was just my way of saying these are the people in the culture who at various points, you know, for me personally, but also for hip hop culture and music and DJ culture, they've been people who have moved the needle in some way. And so how can we think about the things that they do and how they've moved the needle, and how can that sort of inform the ways we think about writing practices in college, literacy and research practices, not only just in college, but I think K through 12 as well as like graduate programs as well.
Yeah, so you would say, which I agree, music plays a major part in our day-to-day lives, especially hip hop. I've always said that, well, 50 Cent has said that hip hop is the ghetto Quran, it's the ghetto gospel. And to me it used to be. Now it's not, because now they're talking about a lot of stuff that you don't experience living in the hood. You don't experience living in poverty. You don't. Back then, years ago, when music first started, when I started listening to music, and some of the artists that I listened to, which, of course, the first artist that I fell in love with music was Nas. Hands down, he's like number one in my book. He's in my top 5, if not, you know, number 1, especially based on that first album, Illmatic. That's it to me. Like that is where hip hop started to me, because that was the first album that I fell in love with. Now, where do you see the journey of hip hop when it comes to I could say conscious rap up to where it is now? Because now it's not conscious rap anymore. You do still have artists that are making conscious rap, conscious music, but not so much, because of the clout chasers, because it's more about money and doing what appeals to the masses and not what you're reporting, not what you've seen or experienced. Where do you see that journey as far as where hip hop has came from and where it's at now?
So I think there's a few things, right? And I want to try and touch on all of the different aspects, because I think there's multiple ways to look at it, right? So number one, I think it's always important to recognize that there is always going to be the content in hip hop that you're looking for. The question is, do you know where to find it, right? That's first and foremost. So I'll give you a perfect example. I just did a panel at Queens College, and I was on a panel with another academic and a female artist by the name of Cyrock. Cyrock is she is in Atlanta. I think she grew up in DC, if I'm not mistaken. She's conscious, but like she's super lyrical. Like she's slicing and dicing like 80 to 85% of the MCs who are making music right now, right? But if you don't know to look for Cyrock, you wouldn't even know that music exists. So somebody like Rhapsody, somebody like Seventh the Genius, obviously, you're gonna have your Kendricks and your Coles of the world. That music is there. It's just a matter of A, knowing where it is, B, porting it, right? Because we have to support these artists for them to continue to make this art. So I think that's one thing that I always stress that's important. The second thing, and this is always interesting to me, I always say that hip hop culture by nature is youth culture, right? I got a lot of gray hair in my beard. I'm not near retirement age by no stretch, but I'm not I'm not in my teens or in my early 20s anymore, right? So I say hip hop is right where it needs to be because it's youth culture. And so the thing that I'm always trying to stress is, how can we now have conversations with the young people about what they're listening to and what it means? Because that's the way that we sort of begin to bridge that gap. So I teach a hip hop class, and at the beginning of the semester, I say to students all day, like, I'm going to learn more from you than you will from me. Because the way that I stay tapped in is by saying to them, yo, what are you listening to? Yo, tell me what that is. Tell me what that means. And I'm also clear about the fact that there's some stuff that my students put me onto that I listen to, and I'm like, okay, that's dope. I get it. There's some things that they put me onto that I listen to, and I'm like, yeah, to me, that's not dope. That music is not made for the frequency of who I am as a listening demographic, right? So it speaks to youth in a different way than it speaks to me. In the same way that when we were younger, we had OGs who put us on, though, you don't know good music, this right here is that good music. And we look at them like, word. So yeah. I want to make sure that we don't kind of just step into that role of what our OGs did to us, right? And really try and hear the young people out and try and figure out, you know, what are you listening to? What makes sense to you? And then I think that's the space where we can have those conversations, right? Like, oh, you listening to drill? Like, let's talk about the messages in that. Like, what does it mean that we seeing like young black men die off of this music? How do we make sense of that? Can we change what those outcomes look like? I think if we're not having those conversations with our young people, then our generation is doing the youth a disservice because we're not trying to mentor them or, you know, I don't want to say give them the proper guidance, right? Because everybody's got to take their own path. But I know when I was coming up, I had people who were like, yo, you might want to think about this, and this before you do that. And sometimes I think it's really easy for adults to dismiss the youth as opposed to like, let me take you under my wing and let's talk about what's what. So that's kind of how I look at the trajectory of the culture. I think that there was, when I was growing up, I would say there was more of I think there was more originality, and I think there was more of and you would hear that variety of music across mainstream listening outlets, right? I think what we're hearing in mainstream listening outlets, like what has become sort of the popular, some of that messaging, we could do without. But I also think that we need to be having conversations with our young people about what that messaging means, and what our responsibility is in it. How do we listen to these messages? Then also, one of the things I think we always forget too is hip hop is now a multi-billion-dollar industry. In the hood and get their family out the hood, right? Yeah. This is a way that one young person might be able to provide jobs for 5, 10, 15, 20 people out of their hood. So I always want us to kind of be mindful of what all of those nuances are as we think about what the trajectory is. And I think there's a way that we can balance that out, because ultimately, while hip hop is global popular culture, it also is rooted in black communities in America, and we need to think about how it's affecting our youth, on a daily basis.
Man, I'm glad you touched on that, because I've actually been guilty of exactly what you said when it comes to because of course I grew up on a certain type of music, and now that I'm older, it's like I believe that the youth should be listening to the same type of music that I grew up on. And yeah, I'm guilty of that too. And that caused me to shut them out and not listen to them and the type of music that they like, because like you said, the music now reflects the mind and the thoughts of that generation, of the younger. Just like when we were younger, our music reflected our thoughts, and yeah, I see exactly, and I'm guilty of that, and I have shut them out because I'll hear something and be like, oh, this is trash. I'm not listening to it. Oh, drill music. They're talking about, running drills and deleting other black men. I'm not. And then I find myself listening to some of it. So I'm guilty of not having that conversation with the youth and not being open to dialogue with them to understand why it is they're listening to drill rap, why they love drill rap so much, why the violence. Because would you say that the violence has always been in hip hop?
I mean, yeah. I also want to be clear though that the violence has been in hip hop in the same way the violence has been in video games, right? So always ask me about the violence, and I'm like, yo, you gonna ask Quentin Tarantino that question? Grand Theft Auto that question? Like, it feels like that question is always one that we want to lay at hip hop's doorstep. And is there violence in hip hop? Yeah, of course there is. Like, I'm not gonna sit here and act like there isn't, but I know that there's violence in other places as well. And so I just want us to be mindful of how we're having those conversations. And I think the other thing too is that, like, while we're talking about the violence in the music, I also want to talk to the young people about what that violence in the music looks like and what it means and how you make sense of it and how you consume it too, right? Because you are what you eat. So if you feed your mind and your soul a certain type of diet, whether it's the physical food, whether it's the food that you read in books, whether it's the food that you're listening to, it's going to have an effect on you. And so trying to figure out, again, how we, what I call it is how we listen ethically, right? There's two sides of this equation for me. We can talk about the violence in hip hop, the drugs, the guns, the misogyny, the sexism, the homophobia. We can talk about all of that. All of that is in hip hop. It's in other places too, but we talking about hip hop today, so it's there, right? Okay. Now we can look at hip hop culture and condemn the culture because those things are in it, right? The question I always ask is, if we know that this is the content in the music, and we make the argument that the people who are making the music are communicating the things that they see in their neighborhoods on a daily basis, at what point do we go into these communities and start changing what these young people are seeing so that we can, if you change the environment, does that then shift the music? At what point do we now become accountable or culpable or responsible if we know that our young people are seeing these things, and instead of trying to go and change those circumstances, we just condemn the thing that they're saying that they see, right? So how do we begin to kind of listen ethically, right? If you're telling me that you see guns and violence in your community, when do we have local, city, state, federal representatives kind of go into those communities and do violence prevention? What's going on with the after school programs? What's going on with the community building? If we know that that's what our young people are seeing, right? If our young people are telling us that they see drugs in the community, like at what point are we going into the community and putting programs in place to kind of curb drug usage, drug sales, whatever the case may be? And then furthermore, at what point do we go into these communities and instead of making them food deserts, at what point do we go in these communities and bring opportunity so that these young people can see a way out of what they may experience on a daily basis?
I agree. So do you think that the music, as far as the conscious music that certain artists make, and then you have the I don't know if we could call it drill music, but the opposite of conscious, what would you say is the opposite of conscious rap, of conscious music?
Oh, wow. I wouldn't necessarily say it's drill, and I don't. The opposite of conscious might be I think we all consider the opposite of conscious music to be kind of maybe what sort of the mainstream hip hop bops might be, right? That's what I would say. So, you know, for every Cyrock or for every Rhapsody or for every Kendrick, right? And I know this is an easy one to do, but for every one of them, you're gonna have a Drake, you're gonna have somebody next door. And I think it's just about having those. I think it's about having those conversations. I think what's so powerful about this Kendrick and Drake moment, right, is Kendrick is really like, yo, this is about the culture. What are we doing for the culture, and what are we doing for our youth? And what are we doing for Black culture? And then Drake's response is kind of like, what, you gonna have the girls twerking in 29 with a dictionary? Like, I was like, so I think it's like with anything, it's like balance, right? When we're eating food, like, you know, like there are gonna be some days when I'm eating, like I'm making sure I'm eating a salad with my dinner, right? I'm making sure I'm eating fruits and vegetables. But then there's gonna be some days when I'm like, yo, let me get my steak medium rare. I know I'm about to clog my arteries, but yo, I'm gonna flush that out in a second. So it's just about trying to figure out what the balance is. And I think where it's important for our generation is just to help our young people understand what that balance may look like. And to remember too, like when we were younger, there was some music that we listened to that was bonkers, right? I tell my students all the time, I could quote some Dr. Dre songs that were crazy first. I mean, Snoop's first album is named Doggy Style. Okay, now we're gonna put that to the side. Yo, Akinelli had a song called Kim Was Saying, like, and there's a place for that as well, right? There's a moment, like sometimes you just want to be able to, like, you just want to go out and you want to go to the club and you want to have a good time, right? And that's okay. How do we make sure that that is not the only facet that we're presenting?
Yeah, that's a great question, because that's what I was about to get to. I believe that my problem with the state of hip hop now is that mainstream only puts out what they want you to. There's no balance between it, you know, especially when it comes to female rappers. All you see is the twerking, the naked rappers on stage, half naked, talking about doing raunchy. That's all you. That's why when you just named, that conscious rapper, I don't even know who that is.
Let me run down a list for you right now, because I have daughters, and so this is something that I'm thinking about all the time. You got Cyrock, you got Rhapsody, you got Seventh Genius, you got Shay Noir.
These are females or
Doechii. One of the reasons I think Doechii is so dope is because she's giving you balance.
Never heard of her.
Doechii will, on one hand, give you a song called Denial is a River, which is basically a song with her sitting with her therapist, like going through what her life has been. But then on another song, she gonna give you that turn up, ratchet, like she gonna give you that work too. So those artists, again, like the artists are there. I think what becomes important for us, again, is seeking those artists out. And then when you find them, support them, stream their music, buy their music from whatever outlets they're asking you to buy them from. Because if we don't support those artists who are giving us the music that we're looking for, it becomes hard for them to make a living giving us the music that we're looking for.
Yeah, I agree. But would you say that money corrupts or has corrupted hip hop?
I mean, money corrupts, absolutely, right? Like that just kind of, you start throwing money in some of these art forms, and that's kind of what happens. Yeah, I mean, I think it's tough, because I think that the music industry in general. Like, they don't call it the music business or the music industry for nothing, right?
Yeah.
And they're gonna put their money behind those things that they feel like can make them the most money. And typically the content that isn't necessarily the best content for us, right? You couple that with the idea that a lot of these major, label heads, like, they're not necessarily people of color. And so what is your investment to the people who are making music that's sending a particular type of message to a particular type of community? Yeah, I mean, money has made the industry tough. Again, though, that the money is, there have been moments, and I think this is kind of case by case. There are some artists who get that money and they do they do cars and the chains, and that, like, there are going to be people who do that, and that's part of our psyche coming out of these moments of not having anything. When you finally do get some money, you want to have those things, right? But then there are some artists who are investing wisely. There are some artists who are putting money back into the community, who are starting programs for young people. And so I think it's case by case, because you can see how the industry has corrupted some folks with the money, right? But then you can see how some artists have taken that money and really done things that make a lot of sense in terms of the messaging that you're giving to our people.
Okay, let me ask you this, and this has been a question that has plagued me for a long time, and I haven't found the answer to it yet. But why do you think it is? And if we were to poll 1,000 people, 1,000 people who listen to hip hop, I would say that probably most of them would listen to or move more towards the raunchy, the drill rap versus the consciousness. Why do you think that is? A majority of people do not like conscious rap. I can ask them if they know who De La Soul is. No. Do you know who Mos Def is? No. Do you know who Black Thought is? No. But then if I ask, do you know who Moneybagg Yo is? Oh yeah. And it's not just kids now. I'm talking about, this is adults as well. They would rather listen to the raunchy rappers talking about sipping lean versus the other, the conscious rapper who's talking against that. Why do you think most people, they gravitate towards that type of hip hop?
So I don't know if it's them gravitating towards it, or if that's what, like, their listening outlets are pushing to them, right? Whether it's kind of like the radio, like, radios called it programming. They still do. So there's a set programming. There's a series of songs that play in rotation, right? So you might hear a song the first time and be like, yo, I don't like that. But then if you hear it 5 times a day for 2 weeks, all of a sudden you're like, oh yeah, well,
Yeah.
like, you get used to it, and then you get programmed into liking it. The other thing too is what the streaming services do with the algorithm. Like, once you're in streaming mode, let's say you listening to an album, right? You listen to the whole album from the first song to the last song. When you get to the last song, that streaming service algorithm will play another song for you. Kind of, if you like A, then you might like B. And if you like B, then you might like C. And so there were times when I find myself just like listening. I have Tidal, because I use Tidal with Serato for when I'm DJing, right? So yeah. I'll listen to an album, and then there might be a song that comes on next, and I'm like, all right, that song is cool. But then that next song, I'm like, yo, there's nothing in my saved songs and my saved albums and my saved playlist. There's nothing that would make you point me to that.
Gotcha.
For real, there's nothing in my listening history that would make you say, yo, he was listening to this, so let me throw this sexy red in his mix. Stop it, knock it off. And sometimes like if you're not tapped into that, you kind of not paying attention, and then all of a sudden you running down a rabbit hole, listening to things that you haven't necessarily chosen. But I think there's a number of different things, and then like typical record label marketing and promotion, right? They're gonna promote the things that they want to promote, and sometimes we just get caught up in that promotion. Like there's no way around it. So I don't know if it is like, I don't know if it's a natural gravitation per se, as much as it might be. There are a lot of systems in place to make you like certain songs. Like it's the music industry. It is the record business. Like,
gotcha.
They're in it to make you like the thing that they want to sell the most.
Gotcha. Yeah. With that being said, music has had a major effect on my life when it comes to the culture, because I realized that everything about me leads back to hip hop. The way I walk, the way I talk, my style of dress. It's down to the shoes that I love so much. The jewelry, the chains. How has hip hop affected your life?
Oh, in the same ways. It affects who I am as a person. It affects who I am as a thinker. I'm a college professor. It affects the ways that I read. It affects the ways that I teach. It affects the ways that I'm trying to relate to students, right? Because if I need students to be able to understand this concept in writing or this concept in African American studies, I might use hip hop as a vehicle to get students to kind of reimagine what that thing might be, right? And I just did this over the past couple weeks. If I want students to kind of think about the importance of how Black people are embedded in the creation and the making of America, let's look at Kendrick Lamar and let's look at the Super Bowl thing, and let's look at that American flag that he has all his dancers create on stage with all Black people, and what that symbolism looks like, and then how he's able to kind of make that symbolic gesture. Oh, it's because there were all of these Black people from the inception of the country to now who have been influential in making this country the thing that we see on a daily basis. So hip hop has always been like, there's oxygen, there's blood flow, and there's hip hop for me. It's just always been like that. The other thing that I think is important is that hip hop has, when I was going to all of the different schools I was going to, high school, college, grad school for my master's degree, and then grad school for my doctorate, hip hop was the thing that kept me sane. Hip hop was the thing that allowed me to remain grounded and focused in some of the most sort of elite, racist, white spaces I had been in. Hip hop was the thing that sustained me and allowed me to keep going. And it was also the thing that helped me to kind of make sense of what I was looking at. Like, oh, this thing that I read in the book, oh, P kind of said that in the rhyme. Like what he said in the rhyme and what I see in the book, like those two things are the same. Different moments where I could, hip hop for me was the mechanism that helped me to understand some of the academic theory that I was dealing with. So I don't know a world or a life without hip hop in it.
Okay. Yeah, me neither. Do you think? Why do you think some rappers are held at a higher esteem than, let's say, an actor? Like you said earlier, the movies we've always seen the Terminator. The Terminator was tearing stuff up, but no one will say, well, Why was Arnold Schwarzenegger in this movie? Why was he shooting everything up? They won't say that, but you will have a rap artist in a video do that, and then they'll say, well, this is why the black culture is so messed up. This is why. Why do you think that is?
I mean, and I think you hit it on the head, right? If we look at hip hop as a particular type of representation of black culture, the goal a lot of times is to demonize black culture, or to dismiss or to diminish black culture and black cultural production, when at the end of the day, if you think about there is an argument to be made, not only hip hop, but jazz, rhythm and blues, rock and roll, blues, all of that music traces back to black origins and origins in black cultural production. There were black people who were innovating those sounds. But for some reason, if we want to diminish a particular culture or diminish a group of people, we try to find ways that we can poke holes into their excellence and into their greatness. And so I think that's part of the reason why we see a lot of that talk about hip hop. And like, oh, those black people are over there making that shoot 'em up, bang bang music. But again, the question I ask is, well, if you know that that's what's happening, what are we doing to change those outcomes? And instead, sometimes we just like to dwell on the fact that they just making that music. But we have to go that extra step. I think that extra step is always important. But yeah, it is. You're right. I mean, you could think of Terminator. I think of movies like Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction from Quentin Tarantino. Like, yeah. I mean, you can make the argument that even The Matrix, there's more violence in The Matrix than there is in a typical rap album. Y'all had bullet shells hitting the ground in slow motion. Like, what are we doing? So I just think that it's I think it's a difficult situation that black folks have been put in, because I think as there's that sort of like demonization and diminishing of the excellence that black people bring to the table, I think that's a way, that's like low-hanging fruit that they use. Like, oh, there's violence in rap music, black people are violent. You know what I mean? Like,
And it's wild to me because, but it's wild because those are the same people who actually put that type of music out there. Instead of pushing the conscious music, they push that type of music out there and then turn around and say, oh, black people are all violent. Look what they're listening to.
And at the same time, that those same folks are using it in the lexicon and the language of popular American culture, right? So the language in hip hop has always influenced, like, just think about the influence of hip hop and black language in sports. Let's just think about Sports Center. I could hit end I could hit end on this meeting right now and just say Hip Hop Sports Center, I'm leaving, right? So when you begin to see these different sort of phrases that people use that come out of hip hop, and people use them in the same way in popular culture, but then try to diminish the culture that they came from, right?
Yeah.
It's all good. Facts. Dope. Like, we could run down a whole series of just sayings that whether it's ESPN, whether it's your recent Liberty Mutual commercial, whether it like McDonald's, like, people will use hip hop as a vehicle to sell you things and get you to spend money on the product that they want you to buy. And those same people who are selling you certain things in hip hop will be the same people to make the argument that the music is violent and all of these things. So like you can't have it both ways in situations like this.
No, I totally agree because they actually do try to have it both ways and put down the black culture, but then there's white culture that is the very same, and they don't get the same pushback. And I've seen that over the past few years. I've definitely seen that, and I used to actually think like that too, where I would say, "Damn, are we as violent as they say, as they portray us to be? Is that all we listen to is ratchet music? Are we ratchet?" Now, we will see with the invention of the internet, we do see a lot more ratchet things going on. But would you say that they can tie it back to hip hop? Because that's what people try to do. They try to, if they see a group of black people acting, it's that music they listen to. They get that from hip hop. Their ratchet music causes them to act this way.
It's interesting because I know black people who don't even listen to hip hop at all. So you can't always say that it's just like hip hop equals black people. I think black people are at the origins of hip hop culture's creation, but to just be able to say that the only people who are listening to hip hop are black people, I think that's just like it's such a faulty argument. Because hip hop is global popular culture. Like people in Japan are breaking to it. People in Europe, like there are older hip hop artists who stay on tour in Europe. Because in Europe they are very tapped into a particular type of hip hop sound. It's just I think that's just such a faulty argument to say that it's hip hop's fault when it could be a number of different things, right? And those things aren't just isolated to black people, right? There are going to be things that happen to people if you grow up in a single parent household, right? Single parent households aren't a function of being black. Like there are white single parent households, there are Latin single parent households, there are Asian single parent households, right? That's all over. Like it's not exclusive to one group of people. Drug use is not exclusive to one group of people, right? Gun violence, mental health, like I could run down a list of things that aren't necessarily just exclusive to black folks in general. So the whole argument of it's always hip hop, nah, like let's look at these other circumstances that are happening in young people's lives to be able to say, maybe an element of it might maybe be hip hop.
Yeah.
But what about the parents? What about the families? What about the friends? What about the school environment? What about the after school environment? What's happening in your neighborhood? Like we can run down a series of things that would explain why certain people might take certain turns. And those turns might not have anything to do with hip hop.
Agree. Yeah, I asked that because we know that music has a major influence on people, and just like we just discussed, hip hop influenced me a lot. It has influenced you a lot, and I know that some of the females that I have conversed with in the past, when they start to repeat some of the lyrics that I've heard some of the female artists say, and I just sit there like, are you serious? This is because these are their role models. These are their role models. The Cardi B's, these are their role models. And then when I hear them basically spitting the same lyrics, talking about F this N and I'll take his money and sucking and to me it's just like, wow, that's not ladylike to me. Because let's be real, in order to be in hip hop as a female, you have to be masculine. You do. You do. It's a very. I can name those artists that I just named now that are talking about drugging, drugging men and buying all the chains and the jewelry and pushing the cars. That's what I was used to men rapping about. Now, when it comes to females like Little Kim, like you said, back then we did have the raunchy music. They were talking more Little Kim was talking more sexual.
Yeah, and someone like Kim, I think Little Kim becomes a really good example, and I think even Foxy Brown too, because the conversations I think they were trying to have in the music was to a certain extent, there are certain elements of it that were about female empowerment, right? Like, if like this dude says that he just went out and had sex with 3, 4, 5, 6 women, like if he can do it, what's the difference with me doing it in the same way, right? And so that was some of the messaging. I think that some of the messaging now I think is even beyond that. It's like, this is how you rope somebody in and take advantage of them. And I think that's a different kind of messaging, because that's not about empowerment.
Really,
that's a different thing. And then this also goes back, right, to what we were saying earlier, right? So I have 2 daughters, so I'm having conversations with my daughters about what's in this music, right? I don't know if all parents are doing that, but there's a certain extent, you have to make sure that you're also sharing with your children and with our young people, like, yo, y'all know some of this is for entertainment purposes. Y'all know some of this is like, they just saying, like, these are hot takes that are about shock value and clickbait, and they doing it to be able to make money. Different people are gonna make different choices about how they want to make their money and what that messaging means, right? And I'm not here to judge what decisions people are making, right? But I do think, again, it's about, like, are we? I'll give you an example that hopefully helps to make it make sense, right? If you only depend on your children to learn when they're in school, and you don't feel that as a parent, part of your responsibility is equally to educate your children, then you can't be mad if the outcome doesn't look the way you want it to look, because you've left that job to someone else, right?
No, it's a fact.
So I love hip hop. I'm also not gonna allow hip hop to be the only messaging that my children hear, right? And I also need to intervene and explain to them, yo, this is what this messaging looks like. This is what this messaging means. What does this mean for you as a young lady, right? How do you think that that's something that guys are gonna like? You think you think acting in that way is, and I don't want to say ladylike, because I don't want to pigeonhole either of my daughters into having to act a certain type of way, but I think that there are ways that we can carry ourselves with dignity and respect and decorum and class, right?
Yes. Yes.
And yo, I'm not leaving that solely to the music to dictate to my children what that should look like. That's when I need to step up as a father and have those conversations with them.
Yeah, you hit that right on the head. Actually, I stated that in one of my previous videos where parents are going wrong at is that they are allowing just the school system, the tablets, the TV. They're allowing those avenues to raise their kids. They're not raising their kids anymore. They go to work, come home, put their kids in front of a tablet, and their kids are just consuming all this content, this music, and then they're not having those conversations with their kids. So the kids don't know any different. Like you said, they think this is real.
You'll get in trouble leaving your children to a device in this internet. You find yourself in a world of hurt. So but this was also this is what our parents did too, right? It wasn't, to a certain extent, parenting is a 24/7 job. It's actually like a 25/8 400 job, right? Because like you're parenting when you're awake, and when you sleeping, you thinking about what parenting is. So you parenting while you're asleep. Some days you get it right, some days you get it wrong, right? But I think what becomes interesting, and the thing that I do love about hip hop is we're experiencing a window of time in hip hop, because the culture is over 50 years old, where you could potentially have a grandparent, a parent, and a child all listening to the same music at the same time. And what does that mean, and how empowering is that we can have these multi-generational conversations about the music and the culture? That's one of the things that I really love about hip hop. When I was growing up, and probably Carl, the same for you, right? It was, oh, that's a fad, it's gonna go out next year, they're gonna be done with it next year. Oh, yep. Just give them to, oh, it's hot this summer, give them to the end of the year, they'll be off it.
Yep.
Half of a century later, we still on the thing you said we was gonna get off of, right?
Yeah.
But again, it is one of the things that I really think, just the music and the culture, one of the things that I think is so powerful about it is because you can have multiple generations listening to the same music. Now, how do we have that multi-generational conversation? And that's something that I think we just, if we're just dismissing the youth, we miss that. But if we can embrace the music and then have some of those, sometimes it's going to be beautiful conversations, right? And then sometimes it's going to be difficult conversations. But I think it's a way that I'm not sure if other genres of music have given us that same kind of opportunity.
You're absolutely right. If I think about it, I really don't think so. I don't think it has. So do you think there is a difference between hip hop and rap, or are they the same things?
So that's interesting. I had in my class last year, just before he passed away, rest in peace to Clark Kent. Clark Kent came to my hip hop class and did a guest lecture. And a lot of people will distinguish it in this way. They'll say hip hop is the culture, rap is the music, right? And to say that hip hop is the music diminishes the cultural impact of what hip hop has done, because hip hop has the 4 or 5 elements depending on how you look at it, right? So there's MCing, there's DJing, there's graffiti, there's breakdancing or breaking, and then the 5th element is knowledge, right? Knowledge of self, or knowledge of the culture. So to say that the music is just hip hop music kind of diminishes it. I think we're in a moment where I think what happens is we talk about hip hop and rap in ways where when we talk about hip hop music, I think we're talking about a specific type of artistic expression that musicians are engaged in, right? And when we say hip hop music, I think it's kind of based on excellence in those particular elements, right? Like, we're not just thinking about somebody who's rapping, but we're thinking about a lyricist, someone who's taking the time to craft lyrics. We're not just thinking about a beat maker, we're thinking about a producer, someone who takes the time to make a song sound a particular way. Whereas I think when people think about rap, they're thinking about the commercial bop, right? They're just thinking about that thing that comes on the radio that they listen to, that might be, it might be constructed in the same format that hip hop music is constructed in, but there's a particular sort of disconnect from those cultural elements that we hold true when we think about what hip hop is. Hopefully that makes sense.
No, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And if I try to apply the same thing to other genres of music, I think hip hop, rap is the only ones that you can actually distinguish the difference between the two, because other genres of music, it's usually, you can't say that you have country and then I don't know what else you can call it besides country music.
Yeah, I don't know if there are subgenres in country like that. I don't, and listen, there could be. I could be wrong. So for anybody who's listening to this and they're a country music fanatic, by no means am I claiming country music expertise, right? So there could be subgenres of country. There could be subgenres. I think there are some subgenres of rock and roll. There are definitely some subgenres in jazz. And I think this conversation, I would say that you see conversations like this similar in other genres of music, right? And it's kind of that, like, here's this commercial element of the music and here's like this authentic version of the music. And the authentic version is the thing that we want to cling to. And when these people take it and run with it and sort of appropriate it just to go commercial, that's not the thing that we want. We want this purest thing over here.
Authenticity, definitely.
All right, yeah. So I'm gonna say, like, if I had to pick, for me, the top 5 most influential albums that have affected my life. Of course, I'm going with Mobb Deep, The Infamous.
Oh man.
Of course, shout out to Have, rest in peace to P. And for me, it's always tied between The Infamous and Murder Music, because Murder Music was the album, like, I was in the studio watching the production of that album. So those are interchangeable for me, like 1A and 1B. I'm gonna go with Illmatic. This is a different album that a lot of people wouldn't name, but I'm gonna name it because this is an album that was influential to me. J. Rue the Damage's first album, The Sunrise in the East. A lot of people forget about that album. J. Rue's rhymes was out of control. Premier was like the beats Primo was making at that time for that whole Gangstar Foundation movement was just stupid. So I got those 3. Most influential albums for me, I got those 3. I'm gonna go with Donuts by Jay Dilla. Sonically, I think that album is incredible. The way that Dilla was putting his foot in beats.
And it's called Donuts? I'll have to check that out. I don't think I...
Yeah.
Okay.
It's all instrumental. No rhymes on it, but just all beats. The beats are bangers. Yeah. So that's got me to 4. Influential in my life. The next one would be, like, it's a 3-way tie. I can't not make this a 3-way tie. It just is what it is. You just gonna have to bear with me. Only Built for Cuban Links by Ray and Ghost.
Ooh, that was fire.
Stakes is High by De La Soul.
Okay.
And Midnight Marauders. For me, those 3 albums, like, you catch me on any other day and I could swap those out. Did I give you 5 slots worth?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And there's so many other albums that, you know, I mean, Hard to Earn by Gangstar was so important to me as an album. The Jungle Brothers, Straight Out the Jungle was super important.
I'll tell you why I asked that question. It is because, like you said, there's so many albums. I mean, so many from the time you and I started listening to hip hop up until now. But till this day, I can say that there are certain albums that can actually put me back in the space of where I was at when I was listening to them. Just like Illmatic, I can literally tell you what I was doing. It was so informative. It was groundbreaking for me. It opened up a new door. Like, I can tell you what I was eating. I can tell you what I smelled during that time. It's just that some albums, they touched you differently. Just like
I could tell you how rest in peace to my cousin Killer Black. I could tell you what I was doing when Hell on Earth came out. My cousin Killer gave me the tape of Hell on Earth. He gave me the whole album on cassette before the album dropped. And so
wow.
I was in college playing it in my 1983 Mazda 626 and playing it for my peoples on some, yeah. And we was just all like, yo.
Before it dropped.
Before it dropped. So that's an album for me that takes me to a certain place. Now you got me thinking about albums that take me to, like, I could tell you what I was doing during Illmatic. I could tell you what I was doing during Hell on Earth. I could tell you what I was doing during I Am.
Oh man, yeah.
They hit what I was doing with Things Fall Apart by the Roots.
Oh man, another favorite. Yeah.
What I was doing when Iron Man and Supreme Clientele dropped. Mad Villainy with Doom and Madlib. I could tell you what I was doing when I got put onto that whole Stone's Throw chamber. Yeah, man. Listen, I could tell you, and this is an important one. I could tell you where I was for Rhapsody's album Eve. Shout out to Rhapsody. My mother had passed away. Right, my mother had passed away in, July 2019, and that Rhapsody album from like that September through into January, like that album helped to heal my soul when it came to thinking of my mother. I could tell you where I was for that whole album, for the Mobb Deep Free Agents joint. I could tell you where I was and what was going down with that. Yeah, so many different and it's tough, right? Because it's 50 years of music and culture, and so there's so many joints, like just even like the idea of five is just so.
But those albums, you can clearly remember how they changed your life and how they influenced you and how they helped you through tough times. Because I too had albums that helped me through tough times when I was on the streets of New York, when I was homeless, when I was listening to Illmatic then. I was listening when Shook Ones dropped. I was with friends then, and we was like, what is this? So a lot of this music, hip hop music, rap music, it's been very influential to both of us. It's been a big influence in both of our lives, and I was glad that I could sit down and have this conversation with you, because it actually opened up more insight for me when it comes to hip hop. And I love learning from others, having these conversations. That's how you build, that's how you learn. It's not just about my opinion on the music and what I think on the music. And you've even helped me open up my mind to having those conversations with the youth now and the music that they're listening to. Because I was closed-minded when it came to that. And I realized that, and I can admit that. So I'm definitely going to have that dialogue with the younger generation to find out what it is they love about, you know, the music that is out now. Even though I do catch myself listening to a lot of it, especially when I'm riding or I'm at the gym. Yeah, I do.
So if you already listening to it, you might as well have that conversation with the youth. And yo, to all the young people out there who see this, who know Carl, like hold his feet to this fire. Like make sure you forcing him to be in dialogue with you. Cause yo, Carl, that's the way we win. When we're helping our youth to make sense of the things that they're about to go through, like each one teach one, right? That's how as a culture and as a community we win.
Facts. But this was a dope conversation, Todd. I appreciate you so much.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate what you're doing. Continue to do what you're doing on this platform.
I appreciate it. Maybe we can have this conversation again. And for those of y'all, K For the Way is Todd's book. You need to go check it out. You need to read it. You need to get it. Todd, tell them where they can get it one more time so they remember.
You can get a signed copy right from my website, drtoddcraig.com. You can get it from Amazon. You can get it from your local bookstore. Yo, the book has been doing well. Won a couple National Book Awards already. So just excited and humbled and want to keep that momentum going. But yeah, you can always get it from my website, drtoddcraig.com. And then just for my socials, you can always follow me on IG at blackink411.
Y'all go do that. Todd, I appreciate you, brother. Salute.
I appreciate you being here. Thanks for having me. Yeah, and I'm always here. So if you want to have this dialogue again, let's talk about what your conversations with these young people are looking like next time.
If you like this video, like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more content.